I press live because they changed the setup. I don't know if you've realized that. And I don't know when to like say, okay guys, we're live now. I kind of just wait like 10 seconds and let people just watch me dabble and just like,
pooping around.
Yeah, like we should probably for sure be live already. People should be able to hear us. But
they're going to see us talking about that, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm watching because I'm going to be I'll share it once it goes live. Now it's popping in.
Cool.
So it's there.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is On Just Restart. This is the On Just Restart podcast. We do it every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And this week I am joined by Rob from Rule of Two Review.
What's up? Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, dude. Really excited to be here. Huge fan of the channel. Lots of crazy, cool Nintendo stuff to talk about. And yeah, thanks, man.
No, yeah, it's we already kind of touched on it before we went live, but like I just think it's really awesome that you love Metroid, I love Metroid, we love Nintendo, and we both sort of watched each other, and now we're actually, on a podcast together just talking about this stuff. So I think it's kind of surreal. But for you guys who have never seen Rob before, he covers a whole bunch of Nintendo stuff, especially Metroid. So definitely check out his channel. It is linked in the description below. I think you guys are going to really like it. If you like this channel, you're going to like his channel because it's deep into speculation and considering all the logical considerations. And you guys are going to like it.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, man. It's just long form content talking just like so similar to what you do, which I think is also very speculative and breaking down what's Nintendo doing, what might be happening here, what does this tease mean about this franchise. I mean, I love that stuff just like you obviously do. So,
basically, we just always figure out how to talk about things for as long as possible about what we love.
Yeah, as long as possible is the key for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm kind of like surprised because... So, like, for example, you know how like there is the whole shtick that a lot of YouTubers always try to aim for like the 10-minute video? Most of my videos are over 10 minutes long, but it's not by intention. It's simply that because I like to talk about like the different facets, and I always find myself, oh, well, that was a 20-minute recording. I got to try and slice it down because really like there's always like this little bit of nuance you kind of have to get to when you really want to like get to the points you want to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could argue it's almost like an art to have to, blab into a microphone for however long and then turn it into something like digestible and entertaining and also get like the meat of the conversation out. And if there's fluff to cut out, kind of like you're talking about, sometimes you just get rid of it,
Yeah, no, for me, there's usually a lot of fluff. There's a lot of fluff, but I try to chop it out. But anyways, guys, for those who are watching, this is we're going to talk about Nintendo, okay? So the plan this time is we're going to be talking about basically the news of the week. Pikmin 3 Deluxe is now rumored. That was a report from VentureBeat, I believe, along with the Mario Remasters. Apparently, according to Jeff Grubb, who's kind of been like our best source of information lately from Nintendo, he's getting a whole bunch of things right, including the Nintendo Direct Mini that happened like about a month ago. Basically, Paper Mario, we just got that trailer, but Jeff Grubb is saying that similar to how that was pretty much done and Nintendo just dropped a trailer, both the Mario Remasters and Pikmin 3 Deluxe are in a similar state, and they could be announced really soon. So according to Jeff Grubb, they could be coming out really soon. So we're going to be talking about that. There is also some hiring updates for Retro Studios. So we're probably going to get into that as well. And we'll talk about like all the different hirings and what that sort of implies for the different things Retro Studios could be working on. One of them for sure is Metroid Prime 4, but I had to tell Rob, but I'm going to ask him, or I'm asking you now in advance, but I'm kind of curious what you think Retro Studios might also be working on, if you think there's anything else there. And then we're also going to be talking about that Metroid tease at the end of the Paper Mario trailer, and whatever you guys bring up in the chat, we'll be going in every once in a while to see what you guys have to say. It's easier if you add us, because it's easier to see your question or point you want to bring up, so keep that in mind. But yeah, that's pretty much the plan for this time, and I guess to just jump straight into things, what do you think Retro Studios is working on, if anything, besides Prime 4?
Man, the mysterious retro game that we never have seen.
That may not exist.
That may even not exist, or could have even been canceled, right? I mean,
it could have been canceled twice, because the last AAA game we got from them was Tropical Freeze in the beginning of 2014. It's literally been over 6 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. And, I think sometimes people forget that throughout that time, Reggie specifically dropped a couple of hints at a couple of interviews, and at this point, I can't even remember where a lot of them were. If it was like at E3 interviews after their conferences or whatever. But I mean, 2 or 3 times he said something. Oh yeah, and Retro's doing a thing, and it's going to be great when we can finally show it to you. And everyone's like, well, great, let us see it. And then it has never happened.
Reggie's been involved in a lot of my heartbreak last few years.
Yeah, isn't that weird how he did that?
Yeah,
it's like some of your biggest joy and some of your biggest heartache can kind of come from Reggie.
Like there's a couple that come to mind. Like, do you remember the Cranky Kong reveal? And Reggie had the Samus pin, and we're like, oh man, Retro Studios has got something. They're hyping it up. What is it? Yeah. Oh, it's
Cranky Kong.
Just Cranky Kong.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was probably like the first like major disappointment involving Retro and Reggie. But the other one that comes to mind is more recent. You remember the Game Awards where we all thought that they were at least gonna reveal Prime Trilogy because there was a whole bunch of rumors for it, and there was even like a talk of maybe us seeing Prime 4 by that point as well. Nothing. But the weird thing was, Reggie chose. Obviously, Reggie was on stage at that point. He still worked for Nintendo, and they were talking about Smash Brothers because it was coming out. But of all the shirts he could have worn, yes, it was a Smash Brothers shirt, but it was a Ridley Smash Brothers shirt. And if you've been paying attention to Smash Bros. Throughout that year, they were using Smash Bros. To hype up other things as well. Like, they had the Castlevania reveal for the characters, and they also teased Luigi's Mansion. And then that was revealed. So you had to think that maybe with the Ridley thing and the whole Prime 4 being in the works, that maybe they were perhaps building up to a reveal there. He had the Ridley shirt on, there were all the rumors, and we got nothing.
Yeah. Well, and that even was predated by the picture of him and Jeff Keighley with the Screw Attack Metroid shirt. That's what really started the hype in the first. And I was completely on board that hype train. I was like, holy crap, I made a video about it. I was like, this has got to mean something. I made several. I mean, yeah, because it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, but I guess it kind of paints teasing in a different light when it comes to Metroid, though, because are we going through the vicious cycle? Because now we're getting another tease for Metroid, and you and I think you and I both agree, like, it's like for sure happening. Like, I mean, I watched your video, like, you still have the mindset that it might not be, and I try to maintain that perspective as well, because disappointment happens all the time. We're never going to always be right about what we theorize. It just doesn't happen. In fact, most of the time we're probably more wrong than we're right. But you got to think that it only seems logical that it is for sure Metroid tease, but you consider, like you said, the Metroid shirt with Jeff Keighley building up to another Metroid shirt where there's a whole bunch of rumors from reputable sources that we were getting Prime Trilogy, and then nothing happened.
Yeah, that was a weird, like, typhoon of news and rumors and information that made it seem like this was the time we're finally going to see it. And at that point, remember, the Switch was only just over a year and a half old. This was in the October through December 2018 period. So this is going back a while. So the Switch was new enough that it seemed like they were just rolling along with new stuff for a while. And so it made sense for 1,000 reasons for Metroid to show up there. And so, I tend to put more money on a theory that a lot of people had, which was that they probably initially did intend to reveal something about Metroid at that show. But, of course, it was only the next month that Metroid Prime 4 got delayed. So it's entirely possible that when the picture of him with Jeff Keighley and the Metroid shirt happened, which I believe was October.
I do think that was probably a real tease.
I think it was. Yes, I totally agree, dude. I think that was a real tease. But 2 months later, by the time December rolled around for the Game Awards, in that time, they probably might have, I should say, made the decision to scrap Metroid Prime 4 and restart it. They knew they were going to announce it a couple of weeks after the Game Awards. So they probably said, okay, well, we're not going to show Metroid at the Game Awards. We're going to rely on the Smash Joker reveal. That's going to be what it is. Reggie, put on your t-shirt to make all the fans angry, so you got to do that part too. Yeah. And then because they knew that they would have known, if any of this is true, we're speculating here, but if that was true, they would have known the delay was coming. They would have known that it made less sense to make a Prime Trilogy or to show a trailer of Prime 4. Because here I was actually more still putting my money on Prime 4 being the thing that showed up than the Prime Trilogy. I think people almost we've been so wrapped up in the Prime Trilogy thing for so long that going back to that event, there were Prime Trilogy conversations, but we were also waiting for just Prime 4 gameplay.
Well, what I thought
that was
what
a
it was,
huge thing.
Right. What I thought was what it was going to be. It was going to be a mirror of the previous year, which was they had the little combo pack of Bayonetta 1 and 2 remastered for Switch, or a port for Switch, and then they had the Bayonetta 3 teaser. I thought they were going to do the exact same thing, but for Metroid. Prime Trilogy, and then Metroid Prime 4. But they obviously had to scrap development or restart development for Prime 4. I think I probably mentioned it, in some of the comments we've made in our videos, like we've touched on it, but it just, to me, it seems like, with when it comes to these rumors, even if they're reputable, like, I did the air quotes of reputable earlier. It's not that I don't believe the sources, it's just that with any rumor, until it's like officially confirmed, it doesn't matter how legitimate the source is, it's still something that hasn't been officially announced by Nintendo yet, meaning it's subject to change. So, for example, these Mario remasters, I 125% believe that this is real, but
125%. That's a lot of percent.
It's a lot of percentage, but just because it's real doesn't mean it'll come out. But I think it will come out, but the point is, like, it might not. So, kind of have to, like, level your expectations a little bit. And I think that's why, for example, I don't know how you feel about Emily Rogers, but she's reported on a lot of things over the years, and she's gotten a lot of flack because, for example, the whole Mother 3 situation, I don't think she's ever lied or anything of that nature. I think simply she was reporting on things she heard about that were probably planned or considered, but they just didn't make it out to market for whatever reason.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I've talked with Emily a little bit before. She seems really great, and there's a difference between lying or being wrong, I think, is probably what you're talking about. Being wrong means you thought you had real information, or you thought you were right on something, and it just turned out to either be false, or you had bad info, or the plans changed, as opposed to knowing, like, we'll say Star Fox Grand Prix. She didn't even start that, but let's just pretend.
Right. Yeah.
Let's pretend like it's not a real thing, but you put it out there because you want the internet to lose its mind. Or the Grinch leak, the infamous Grinch leak, like somebody totally faked
I bought into that. I feel bad because
you were a Grincher.
I was a Grincher. Yeah. Because at the time, like, it was just like, I mean, it was a huge lesson in confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time. Well, I will say, not to steer the podcast, but we did get pretty far away from what is retro making, by the way.
Yeah, we did. Which that may happen a few more times during the show, just for the record.
For sure.
But so what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's not even like I really have an answer. It's just such a good topic. Because I think a lot of what a lot of people have thought before, maybe they were making another Nintendo IP, like a Star Fox game, even if it's not a Grand Prix, whatever that whole thing is. Like, maybe they were just making a new Star Fox game, which is my personal wish. I would like them to make a Star Fox game.
Could have done a great job with that, yeah.
Oh, they would kill it, The other thing that I don't think enough people have considered, I'd heard some people bring it up, but I don't think enough people talked about it, is if they were just making a new IP. Maybe Nintendo was like, hey, it's time for a new IP. Retro, you've been great. Everything you've made for us is solid gold. 5 games. They had slight production on Prime Hunters on the DS, but mostly it was the 3 console games and the 2 Donkey Kong games. And all 5 of those games are just incredible.
Right.
And so my hope was, it was like, hey, it's time for a new IP and we want you guys to do it. The same way Xenoblade became something that Monolith makes for them. Mm-hmm. Whatever this other thing could have been. And it almost makes me worry that if their game that they were making was canceled, which it might just be delayed for Prime's sake, but let's say it was canceled outright, my fear is that it was probably easier for Nintendo to cancel a new IP than it would be to cancel a sequel in an established franchise.
There's no expectation for a new IP.
Yeah, no one's gonna miss, Super McGee and the Flying Bubbles, whatever the game was gonna be, if they didn't know it existed in the first place. But if a new F-Zero or a new Star Fox was being made and that didn't come out, well, we the fans have been asking for new entries in those franchises for a while, so we're missing those games.
Right, so even if, let's say they were working on that, at least they didn't announce it and then tell us it was canceled. So that's a good thing. So I'm curious what you think of this take, because this has been my perspective on the whole situation. So we heard about, Imran Khan, like when the whole restart development announcement came out, he came out and said on Twitter that from what he heard, there was a lot of issues with developing the game because they had a whole ad hoc development structure and it wasn't working out. And then Retro Studios approached Nintendo. Obviously, Retro Studios is a part of Nintendo, just for the record, but they had this demo, and I don't know if it was a proof of concept or like some sort of playable demo, and Nintendo really liked it, and then they decided to switch over development to Retro Studios. But the weird thing is, I think they very clearly want Metroid Prime 4 to be very high quality. Like, this is a high budget, huge project for Nintendo, like considering the way they announced the restart. Like, to me, it's kind of like they're treating it like Breath of the Wild. Like, they're going to be very careful about this game. And so if they are being this careful about this game, why would they give the game over to Retro Studios if they haven't been able to make a game in 6 years? Like, that seems a little weird to me. Granted, we don't know what Retro Studios has been working on. Maybe from Nintendo's perspective, they know, and they're like, we've seen what you've done, and we're comfortable handing this over to you. Now, that's probably the case. I think, obviously, Nintendo handed it over to them because they were comfortable with that. Does that comfort suggest that there is a game, or does that just mean that they just liked what they were doing behind the scenes, and they felt that was enough, plus the demo and the timing to just switch over development to them?
I mean, yeah. Really good points. I think that both are options for sure, because we're kind of predicating just the whole idea on the concept that whatever they were making was canceled. There is a chance that it's just a game that is still being developed for whatever reason.
Maybe we'll see that within the next year or so, and Prime 4 comes out like either, I'm hoping holiday 2021, but it very likely could be a 2022 game.
Yeah, that's been my target date for a while. It's been 2022. So, but the thing is, if what they were making wasn't canceled, your theory could still be right that what they were making could have just been so great and so badass that Nintendo was like, yo, you guys are clearly still great. You still got it, even though most of your team has switched around and been replaced since, Prime 3. You're still good. So let's take what you're doing here and let's have you continue what you're doing also with Metroid Prime 4, because like you said, they obviously kind of approached them saying, hey, we're willing to take care of this. I don't know. I think that they're all options. It's going to be this eternal mystery that if we never find out what they're making or what they were making, it's going to be a what if, man. The same
Maybe
way
we'll get a Beta 64 episode of it someday.
Yeah, something like that. It makes me think of The Last Guardian, which was the PlayStation game, right? Which had, I hope that in 10 years we get like a documentary about what happened with that game, because it's just this crazy story, and it disappeared. It was never going to happen, and it came back, and it came out, and actually it was just pretty okay. But it was just such a crazy thing. And so what's the mystery there? Well, what's the mystery with Retro's game? What's the mystery with Retro's 6-year gap between 2014 Donkey Kong and 2020? Like, we want that story. Just like, what I really want is, what was the Metroid Prime 4 that was scrapped? I want to see that game. I want to know what was happening and what it looked like.
I have a hard time believing they're just going to throw it out altogether. They
won't. They won't.
I think the problem is that we probably will get it someday. Like, some of the content will be repurposed. I know they said they were restarting development, but I have to still wonder, will they still reuse some components of what they scrapped in the new development for Prime 4? Like, maybe some of that will still be carried over to some extent. We know Kensuke Tanabe is still the producer, so at least his ideas are going to go into Prime 4. I think that won't change too much. It's just really more the assets and the build, I guess, right?
Sure. And the team behind it, the talent behind it.
Yeah. I do want to get to all the hirings, because I feel like this definitely is relevant to what we're talking about now. But there are people here who want to hear us talk about Pikmin and Paper Mario, so I think we'll put a pin on the Metroids, and we'll come full circle with it in a little bit. Because there's still a lot of Metroid stuff to cover. But let me kind of say hello to the chat here, see a couple questions, and then we'll move on to the other topics here. So let's see. Beverly, Larry, how you guys doing? Wolfgang, hello there. So let's see. Wolfgang 630. I 100% believe The Metroid at the end of Paper Mario trailer was a tease. It's meant to be an Easter egg. Why show it? You would let fans find it and when they play the game. I think we'll see a Metroid 5 trailer reveal this year and release next year. Can be part of Metroid Anniversary Celebration. Breath of the Wild 2 is probably coming this year, but Nintendo couldn't make it happen. This is like a few different like points there. I mean, we already kind of said we both agree that it's probably a tease, right? But so I've been on the side of it of me thinking that it's Metroid 5, like a new Metroid. For those who are confused, Metroid 5 would be a sequel to Fusion, the 2D games. It's separate from the Prime games. So I know there's a Prime 4. It's a separate thing. But my point is I feel like maybe it's time for us to get a sequel instead of another remake because we just got one. What's your perspective on that?
Well, if you go back to the rumors in January, which are not fact, but if you go back to them,
the Sabby one, right?
Sabby one, who was actually the other person, Zippo on Reddit, I think is where it first came from. But Sabby's the one who shared it on. Yeah, and so that whole rumor predicted Paper Mario. That's now true.
Yeah,
and in the same collection of statements that they were predicting and putting out there at the same time, was a Metroid game related to Fusion.
Which could be interpreted as either Fusion remake or maybe a sequel.
Yeah, or I go a little bit deeper, and I know we were supposed to step away from Metroid, but he asked us a Metroid question.
It's fine.
Yeah. I won't go too long on this, but I go a little bit deeper because I think that it could also be a Fusion 2. I think that a Fusion 2 is kind of different. Not
like a direct Metroid 5, but just kind of an expansion of the Fusion idea. I'm down with
that.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that could be really cool.
Yeah. And I would be happy to be wrong to say that it's not a Fusion remake. Because I actually, of all the Metroid games, Fusion is at this point the only game I haven't beaten. I've played it, but I haven't beaten it. Because
it's hard. It's a hard game.
Yeah. And I guess technically before Samus Returns came out, I had never played the Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. So I'm counting Metroid 2 because I played Samus Returns. But yeah, so I like that idea, actually. I think it kind of makes sense because they haven't really like pushed the Metroid story forward in a while. So almost like maybe considering like a side story kind of might be a safer play, but still ultimately still what we kind of want. So I can kind of see that. I think that's a good point. But he also brought up Breath of the Wild too. So I'm curious on your perspective on this. So before the whole pandemic situation, my perspective was that Breath of the Wild 2 would likely be a holiday this year release for the holidays because we had an E3 reveal for it using the same engine as Breath of the Wild, which cuts down development a fair bit. We got an interview from Aonuma saying they're returning to Hyrule. So like for all these different reasons, you got to think that they're pretty far along, and a lot of Zelda games usually stories develop late into development, and that was to me a story trailer we saw last year. So my perspective was they're really far along, and I felt like a year and a half afterwards would probably be the good time to release Breath of the Wild 2. So that's what I thought, but now I'm not that confident anymore because, well, we don't even know what's happening past July, and 5 days ago we didn't know what was happening past May.
You didn't even know that.
Yeah. So I feel like at this point, any predictions I had should just be completely thrown out the window because we don't know what's going to happen. But your personal perspective, what do you think? What was going to happen and what is maybe going to happen now?
Well, pretty much since it was revealed, I kind of was thinking that the game was 2021. That's sort of been my target date, which isn't obviously exciting for people because as soon as we saw it, we wanted it like ASAP.
Right.
So, holiday 2020, holiday this year has always been more exciting. And I've always seen it as a possibility. But I really have been focused on that 2021 date. It just felt like, yes, we know they're farther along in that game than something like a Metroid Prime, for example, because they're building it off of a game that already existed. They confirmed that it was born out of DLC for Breath of the Wild. Right. So they already had some probably story concepts and gameplay tweaks like already in place and ideas using the same engine, only slightly better. It just makes sense for them to be pretty close to releasing it, but I just didn't see it as a 2020 game. But yeah, I'm in a weird kind of almost opposite boat as you, because now the pandemic comes along, and for all intents and purposes, I think I or anyone should expect the game to be delayed further into like a 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But as time has gone on, even through the pandemic, I have been warming up to the idea of it actually being a holiday 2020 title. And I don't really know why, other than the longer we've gone on without understanding what they're doing in the rest of 2020, the more I've tried to figure out what could they possibly be doing. I mean, Paper Mario was never on my radar, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, what else could they do? And it's like, well, they have this humongous Zelda game that is going to be a massive hit, and we know they didn't start it from scratch. They're building it off of what the prior game was. So maybe 2020 makes sense. Like, it started to kind of work in my brain. Does the pandemic change the situation? It's tough to say, because it sure could be changing it. But even that would only be a change if they were originally planning to put it in 2020. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think if I was still, let's pretend I was going to go to Vegas and put money on this, I think I would still put money on 2021. But I'm not totally shutting 2020 out. I mean, I will say though, we're every day is like getting closer and closer to the time where they would need to reveal that game, because it's so big.
If we go by history, they should have revealed it months ago what was going to be the holiday lineup.
Well,
yeah,
honestly, if we go by history, it would have been like 3 years ago as far as Zelda's, because it was like 3 years for Breath of the Wild.
Right.
But you're right. You're definitely right. There's another cog in this wheel though, which is, and I don't know if this would affect Nintendo's decision, but now we know this holiday has 2 new next generation consoles coming out.
Yes.
So
right.
that could more convince Nintendo to release Breath of the Wild this year, or more convince them to delay it. It could go either way.
So I have another idea related to this. I brought it up in a video I published earlier this week. So my take on the whole pandemic situation, a couple different things. One, so we got that Q&A, right? And we got some translations, and one thing, I don't know if I have it. Actually, I do have an image of it here. Nope, apparently I don't know how to spell Twitter and search for it on my computer. Here we go. Alright, so for those watching the podcast, you'll see this come up. But basically, I took this tweet from Rotford Sefazan, and I highlighted one part that I found to be interesting. And basically, I'll just read it out and I'll tell you the highlighted part. He mentions there are other titles they plan to release this year, in addition to those already announced. However, it may be difficult to finish development during the current situation as employees are working from home. But this is the highlighted part. Their forecast assumes they will release as planned. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but to me, that seems like they're preparing investors to expect some potential delays, but it's not really set in stone yet. At this point, they're still optimistic that their initial plan for 2020 is going to carry out for the most part. That was what I sort of interpreted from that.
Yeah, it could be that. It could also be them trying to calm investors' fears too. You know, they might have wanted to sneak that in. Because the whole statement they were obviously making to those investors is, yeah, things are really hard. People are working from home. There's a pandemic, so games are fluctuating. But don't worry, because we're still projected, so it's still okay. Calm down. Don't sell anything.
That makes sense. It could just be that they're just trying to temper fears and just keep everyone like, stay put. Don't worry. Just stay tuned. We'll figure it out. And that could totally be the case. I mean, I think either way, no matter how you look at it, nothing is really set in stone right now.
It's not. No.
But my take is, if Breath of the Wild 2 was planned for a holiday 2020 release, which to me makes sense. It would make sense because, as you mentioned, there's the next generation systems coming out, and even though Nintendo's not a direct competitor, you're still competing for the spotlight. People have to spend their money somewhere. It makes sense that, hey, you're gonna want to have something out there that people are gonna want to spend their money on, because if not, people are gonna spend their money elsewhere. So something like a Breath of the Wild 2 to me would be ideal, because I think it could even be a better game than Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild was Nintendo's first foray with Zelda into the open world format. I think with their second take on it, they could perfect that formula. So I think they have a huge opportunity to really hit it out of the park with Breath of the Wild 2, even though Breath of the Wild already hit it out of the park and then some. I think they could do even more with Breath of the Wild 2. So I think in terms of that spotlight potential, I think Breath of the Wild 2 would be the kind of game that would make sense in terms of competing with next gen, right? But it's still, they may just push it off. It may not really matter. Technically, the 35th anniversary for Zelda's next year. Maybe they'll do something special for that, and I get all that. But you remember Mario Odyssey? I don't know if you remember, but when we go back to January 2017, they had a report that Mario Odyssey was virtually done, and they were just polishing things up. The game came out October that year, so it was basically done for over half a year. So, and the thing is, it was planned. Nintendo, like the Wii U sort of, you know, it was dead for a while. Nintendo sort of spent their time building up for the Switch launch, so they had things planned. I wonder if, similar to that, Nintendo has plans to compete with next gen, and they want to have a big game there. And maybe it won't be Breath of the Wild 2. There's a whole bunch of other options, right? Maybe it is a Secret Retro Studios game, for example, or maybe it's just a Mario Remasters. But I have to think that maybe they've been done. They have something they've been done with for a while, and they have that set for release then. If Breath of the Wild 2 isn't a Mario Odyssey situation, where it's been virtually done for most of the year, even if there is a pandemic, I mean, obviously there is, but that whole switch, that transition to mobile development, remote development, that might lead to delays. But if they're virtually done half a year in advance, they might still be able to hit their projected launch for that, if that was planned for the holidays. If that makes sense. Like, and all of this is speculatory, obviously, but
it's all we can do, especially in 2020, man. That's like all we can do with Nintendo, is we're speculating and guessing. And so I mean, it's a good point. They might be sitting on an almost complete version of that game. It doesn't feel like that's the case, but it is possible. And you bring up a good point with Odyssey, because, you know, being done with Odyssey so early, but not releasing it until October of that year, was just all about strategy. It's like, where can we strategically place this game to be most effective for our new console that, you know, for all they know, wasn't even going to be a hit. We saw that game before the Switch came out. People were really excited for the Switch, but, you know, it could have gone either way by the time it came out. Luckily, it did nothing but just go vertical with its sales and its popularity. But it could have plateaued, it could have gone up and down, and who knows what. So they were like, when can we, if we're going to need to lift up a potentially struggling console 6-7 months after it's out, when can we put that game out? And with Breath of the Wild 2, maybe they would do a similar situation. When I think about the consoles coming out and them sitting on a complete Breath of the Wild 2 and wanting to release it as competition, I think that as far as games go, it's the number one thing that they could release to kind of take mind share away from this, you know, week or this month when 2 next-gen consoles launch. It's like, well, you get a PlayStation 5, you get an Xbox Series X, or you get this mammoth Zelda sequel humongous release. Yeah. And so Nintendo, they get to keep themselves in the conversation throughout that period. I think that's mostly the reason you do it. But that's also, here's the reasons you don't do it, is because that's a time when people are battling and competing for everyone's gaming dollar. And in a normal November, it's just a bunch of video games everyone's putting out. So people can buy multiple video games. But if you're putting out 2 $500 next-gen consoles, people are going to be like, well, do I spend $600 on my PS5 in a game? Or do I buy Breath of the Wild 2? Or maybe I can only buy a console and a game. I'm not going to buy a PS5, but then buy Zelda and then not have a game for my PS5 or Xbox or whatever. So the battle for the dollar becomes much tighter in that period, right? And so that's why I was like, you know, it could convince them to do it to keep them in the conversation, or convince them to delay to 2021 to just make sure Breath of the Wild 2 has more of a free period to launch in its own bubble where it's the star, right?
And I totally understand what you're saying. Like, it could kind of go either way. And actually, to that idea, I believe during the Q&A, Nintendo mentioned how there is, I don't want to say it's a fear, but there's a possibility that because a lot of people are unemployed right now, and there's a pandemic, people, you know, right now sales are good because people haven't been out of work for that long yet. But by the holidays, how are things going to be? Could that lead to people not spending that much money once people have been unemployed for 4, 5, 6 months? Like, what if we're in a situation where holiday sales are just at an all-time low? So then it just kind of goes more to your point, like, why throw Zelda out there when it's probably not going to sell that much anyway because of the economic situation, but also because of the competition? Why not just wait till March or something, or sometime later where it'll be a healthy economic environment, and then just allow that to thrive? then.
100%. Not to mention, you obviously, I'm sure you know, like there is the concern that this thing gets a little bit worse coming out of the summer, right? So going into that fall holiday time,
totally possible.
I hope not. It's weird. My
Yeah.
fiance and I talked about that literally this morning. We had a whole conversation about that, and like, do you think it's going to happen? What if it does? What if it doesn't? Because it's just such a crazy time. And I think you brought up March. I was actually going to bring up the same thing because we can't forget that delaying it 4 months from like a theoretical November to a March becomes a cool way for them to just put it out at Breath of the Wild anniversary time.
It could be an Animal Crossing situation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. They can clearly sell huge sales of great games in March with Breath of the Wild and with Animal Crossing this year. So, I mean, they probably don't have to feel so restricted to that November next-gen console release time.
Right. So, and then Nintendo's also most of their titles are evergreen titles. So once they get out there, it's just kind of going to continue to sell regardless. And I guess also with Breath of the Wild itself is still selling. So maybe you don't even need a Breath of the Wild 2 necessarily, because a lot of people are buying Breath of the Wild. So waiting a little bit more time, kind of, the people who have bought the initial Breath of the Wild, that extra weight makes even more people who got the initial one more likely to get the sequel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But then what happens is the fact that so many people are really kind of getting tired of waiting for games from Nintendo.
And actually, I have a few friends who have canceled their pre-orders for Metroid Prime 4 just because there's no information on. Like, I have friends that are just like, they just don't even believe it's gonna happen. And I'm like, don't worry, it's gonna happen. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But the point is though, like, it's just sometimes the consumer can kind of just get fed up with waiting. Sometimes
just get tired. Yeah,
which
that's okay though.
Go on.
Go ahead.
No.
Well, I was gonna say that that's okay because. Even if people say, well, I'm done believing in Metroid Prime 4, I'm done believing in Breath of the Wild 2, or Pikmin 4, or whatever, and they cancel pre-orders, at some point, those games pop back up, we see the trailers, we get the release dates, everyone gets hyped again, and so people are going to reinvest, they're going to pre-order.
So it's not like the sales actually lost, necessarily, it's just...
Exactly. Yeah. Nintendo get them back. That's what Nintendo does. They get everybody back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess the other point I wanted to bring up was that even if we don't get Breath of the Wild 2 this year, which is becoming increasingly more of a safe bet, that doesn't mean they can't give us a trailer. That doesn't mean we can't get an update on it this year. And that alone to me will be very, simply the experience of getting these reveals is kind of part of being a Nintendo fan. Like, it's not just, yes, obviously playing the game is like that core piece, but hearing about these games, seeing these games, and talking about them, I feel like is also like an integral part to the experience. So just getting a teaser trailer at some point this year, I think, will be kind of magical for a lot of us.
Yeah, that fits into the whole Nintendo being a little bit more forthcoming and transparent with info. I mean, and I know you said you watch a lot of my content, and I've talked about that several times over the past probably 2 months. It's been a huge focus of a lot of my conversations, is because I'm patient. I'm not somebody who's been angry at Nintendo for being slow or quiet or waiting for directs. Like, it's so clear that everybody is so impacted by what's happening, and so as I've said, you've heard me probably say this in my videos, like, I am happy to afford Nintendo or any company as much time as they need to do whatever they need to do for their business. Like, keep people safe, don't force games out by risking people's lives, like, whatever. But at the same time, Nintendo, being one of the more quiet companies in the industry right now compared to other companies, at least recently, has been a little bit frustrating, because I don't think it would be crazy for Nintendo to translate or relay some of their business stuff even to us, the consumer and the gamer and the content creator. And so within that is your point about a trailer for Breath of the Wild. So why couldn't they just say, hey, it's just time for an update on this game we showed you last year. Things are slow, things are crazy, release dates are up in the air, but we're still working on this game.
At least
keeps the you're right, keeps the conversation. So I'm with you there. I think that it would be, and they might do it. I don't think that it's impossible for them to do it. It would just be nice of them to do it.
So I'll say that we're talking about 2021 now as maybe being that target date for Breath of the Wild, but when? Like, we mentioned March. Like, if it's March, I think, like, Nintendo pretty much has to talk about it before then. I mean, there's some precedent not to, like look at Paper Mario, for example, but Paper Mario is not on the same scale as Zelda. But if it's later in the year, like if it's a holiday title for 2021, then you don't really have to talk about it until maybe an early 2021 direct. But the point is, like,
yeah,
I think there's a pretty decent chance that we'll see a trailer this year, but obviously we won't know until it happens.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So that was one question.
We don't have enough time for that. We're gabbing probably way too much.
No. So I'll just run through real quick here, guys. Let's see. Esteban Adamy, is there any chance that Metroid Prime 4 would be rated M? I think that's a really interesting question. I saw someone talk about it on Twitter as well earlier. Well, Rob, you're the guest. Why don't you give me your take on that first?
About Metroid Prime 4 being rated M? Was that what it was?
Yeah, if you think it's possible or likely.
I mean, I don't think it's either, really. And I'm not even saying I would hate the idea. It's not that I would hate the idea, but it doesn't really fit Metroid's MO. Also, I mean, I think it would be cool if Nintendo did make an M-rated game. I've long said I think that would be cool. Not because, like, oh, blood is cool and makes games better. But I just think it would just be neat to see Nintendo branch out into something that skews a little bit older.
Yeah, and you're talking about in-house because, I mean,
yes,
you could argue technically Bayonetta 3 is Nintendo, and it is posted by Nintendo, it's rated M, but it's not an in-house team. Platinum Games is not owned by Nintendo. So it's a partnership that they have, which is why Bayonetta would be
and
Nintendo.
Bayonetta, you're right, and Bayonetta the IP is also not owned by them either. So that's definitely completely free. I mean, No More Heroes is another good example, right? Like that's not owned by them, but it's mature and it's been mostly
it's associated with Nintendo. Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the closest we get to like M-rated Nintendo games. I do think there was like this one I mean, I'm sure it's happened a few times. One that comes to mind that I remember was, do you remember Geist on the GameCube? I never played it. I just knew of it. It wasn't reviewed well, but it was like a first-person shooter involving like paranormal activity, and it was M-rated. So they
probably was. I played that game. I owned it. I completed it. I thought it was pretty good. Was it made by N-Space? What was that developer? I think N-Space might have been the developer at the time, but don't quote me on that. I didn't remember that it was mature though, so that's interesting that you bring that one up.
Maybe I'm wrong. Let me I'll just do the quick fact
check.
Yeah,
I'm curious. I mean, I could sort of see it, you know, in the GameCube era. I could see because it was a shooter, and you're like a ghost that takes over the lives of people, and maybe they die when you exit their bodies. So that could, and there's probably blood when you shoot people. So I can see how that would be mature. But while you look that up, when it comes to Metroid, I just don't think it makes sense to do a mature Metroid game. Yeah, Nintendo making a Metroid game, Nintendo making a mature game would be cool. But Metroid, I don't think is the franchise. And I'm somebody who's also long said that I think that Metroid could be made into like a horror game. I think that some Metroid games have a bit of a scary. Yeah, see, it seems like you agree.
Oh yeah.
I think there's a great opportunity to put like fear and tension at the forefront of the vibe of a Metroid game, and that would work best actually in first person. Metroid Prime 3 had it a little bit, Metroid Fusion had it a little bit, and I think they could make that like the star of a Metroid game is the fear element. But I don't think they need to do it with blood and swearing and naked people and all that stuff. So
yeah,
I'm not saying I would be against it if they did make Metroid Prime 4 mature, but I would be like, very curious choice, and I just don't. It's too risky for them. I don't see them doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. First of all, apparently, Geist was M-rated. It was one of the few GameCube games that were posted that was M-rated. But
cool.
If I remember correctly, I'm not sure if it was the original Metroid. I think it was the original Metroid that was inspired by, I want to say, the movie Alien. And I think
that's where the franchise came from.
And the name of the character from Alien was her name Ridley. I think Ridley was like they named Meta Ridley or Ridley off of the character from Alien. So there's a lot of that influence there. And I always thought that if they ever made a Metroid movie, it should be sort of modeled after an Alien movie. Mm-hmm. But to your point though, like I think they could totally make a horror game, and it doesn't have to be M-rated. I feel like the Metroid games already have that fear element, as you suggested. And there are really dark Nintendo games that aren't M-rated. The best example that comes to mind is Majora's Mask. That game, to me, is more of that creepiness, that I could like. I get more out of that than say something like a typical horror movie, like say Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like to me, Majora's Mask has more of an impact for me in terms of that creepy sort of atmosphere.
Yeah, I think it's more people. And I'm not saying it. The person who asked the question feels this way, but I think when people look for that, they maybe are confusing mature as just being bloody, and having swearing and stuff like that.
And there can be tons of alien blood. It'll still be rated teen.
Exactly, because it'll be blue or green or whatever. But like when you talk about when you make the comparison to a Majora's Mask, that's where the dark aspect of that game isn't coming from the blood and stuff. It's coming from like the themes of the game and the story and the tone and the vibe and the atmosphere.
Which is way more impactful to me.
Yes. Same in horror movies, honestly.
Yeah.
I think those are scarier movies than like a Texas Chainsaw, like you said.
There's this one series that I really like it came out on Netflix not too long ago. Have you ever heard of Mindhunter?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, I recommend giving it if you're into like psychological thrillers. Like basically, it has
Isn't that in the Silence of the Lambs kind of universe? Is it that Mindhunter, or is that not it?
It might be. I'm not sure. Okay. I don't think it's really mentioned, but it is similar because it's based off real events. I think where basically you have two cops who are learning more about behavioral science, like I believe in the 60s, and their job is to interview serial killers, and it gets really dark. But to me, that series does a better job of being like a horror sort of thriller movie than most like straight up horror thriller movies that deal with the paranormal because of its atmosphere and the music and the way they portray these characters. And a lot of it just comes down to like all the things you mentioned, like theming and music and details and characters. That to me can create much more of an impact than just straight up like explicit actions.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just quickly get through the chat and then we'll actually talk about Paper Mario.
Yeah, I feel like your poor fans are probably wanting us to talk about that so badly.
Yeah, I saw a couple questions about it. Let's see.
We can quick fire if we need to instead of gabbing.
Sabbath64, he added me. Maybe when all the Mario remasters are announced, maybe that will lead to a new 3D Mario game. Another tough question because what do you make of the Mario remasters, Rob?
I mean, I think I tend to believe them because the way the story broke and the details about it just felt right. It just feels. I mean, real talk. I don't know any behind the scenes info or anything, so I'm not trying to put any leaks or any of that stuff out there. But the way that information came out to me read like something real. So I'm not saying it is real. I'm not saying that I know that it's real, but it feels right to me. But I still constantly question how they would release those games, right?
I mean, my personal belief is that it's going to be a 3-game collection. Because I have a hard time assuming the rumor's true. Like, if you read the rumor as 100% true that all of that's coming out this year, I have a hard time seeing Nintendo release 64, Galaxy, Sunshine, the Paper Mario game, and 3D World Deluxe all in the same year, and that would all be in the second half of the year. Like,
the same 6 months.
Yeah, so to me, it feels more like they're going to be remasters, and when I say remasters, I mean something closer to a Wind Waker HD kind of remaster at best. And they'll just, fine-tune the controls, potentially some new content, but I'm not expecting, but basically just fine-tune controls and just sprucing up the graphics a little bit for each game, and then putting them together as a package. And that, to me, would be really special. That's all I expect for Prime Trilogy HD, actually, and that would have me incredibly hyped. And I think that's totally feasible to come out this year. Some people are hoping for like an Odyssey-like remake, which I just feel like is unlikely, especially because it was called a remaster, but that's kind of like a blurred line situation depending on who chooses to use the word.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
But my point is that if it's not like a full ground-up Odyssey-style engine kind of remaster, which I think is likely, then Nintendo could very well still be developing Odyssey 2, and that could be something that comes out later down the road. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that we all probably know that there's no doubt that Nintendo is making a new Mario game. That's
yeah.
My chair is dropping on me. I just realized. I was like, why is this so close to my face? Oh, my chair is dropping. Yeah, I mean, we all know that Nintendo's making the next Mario, but is it something close enough to release this year around these remasters? Is it something that releases in the next year or two for the Switch? Is it something that's meant for the console after the Switch? We don't know. Just like, another game that we haven't really brought up that could make sense in 2020 is like a Mario Kart 9, for example. Like, we know they're making another Mario Kart. That series makes way too much dough for Nintendo to not, and every game is great. Even Double Dash, I don't care what the haters say, every game is great. And that is a game that could release on the Switch this year or in the next couple of years, or could be planned to launch the following console, because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was so successful on the Switch.
There are rumors, like I think Sabby's brought up Mario Kart 9. Well, he didn't specifically say Mario Kart 9, but he said there was a title. Big
the thing about the tires or
right.
something, right?
But what other big Nintendo holiday title could involve tires? Like Mario Kart seems the only one to match, and we didn't get like a dedicated Mario Kart game for Switch. But if you look at the sales for Mario Kart Deluxe, it's the best-selling game on Switch, and it's still selling. So
it's a monster. It's a complete monster of a game, like the sales.
Yeah. So do they really need to come out? I'll buy it. I'll be stoked for it. I just debate is if there's really a need for it instead of just focusing on developing another game instead.
Yeah. Well, that's honestly why I'm almost 50-50, but I slightly lean towards the next Mario Kart just being on the next console, pretty much for that reason. I think that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe will pretty much cover the majority of the Switch's life just fine. I mean, I would like it sooner than that. I'd like it this year even. Like, I've played Mario Kart 8 enough. I'm ready for a new one.
I just want
new
tracks.
To your point, like new tracks, and I mean, Mario Kart 8 did a good job of bringing in like the verticality and like the gravity stuff. So that was a cool evolution that makes it feel different than the prior ones. Hopefully they have some kind of trick for Mario Kart 9 to make it, because Double Dash used the two racers. 7 introduced the gliders. 8 introduced the verticality and that stuff. So what would 9 introduce? Who knows? But hopefully new courses, but hopefully also new gameplay tweaks,
Yeah. What I want for Mario Kart is to them to kind of Diddy Kong racing-ify it a little bit. Like maybe...
I've thought of that.
Because if you look at Mario Kart 8, the world is so beautifully realized. I kind of want to see more of it. I kind of wish the tracks were a little bit more open. And I've always wanted a little bit more of a story mode to the Mario Kart games. So if they were to give us the same Mario Kart, like I feel like 8 mechanically is like the epitome of Mario Kart, in my opinion at least. Like really it's just more about filling up that game with content. And I feel like it kind of needs like a dedicated story mode. And if they were to put a Mario Kart game on Switch, having like a dedicated story mode with maybe a hub world to explore and more open maps, and still kind of keeping the same mechanics or sprucing them up a little bit, and also including like more Nintendo characters, making more of a Smash Kart, that to me would be one way they could sort of differentiate the game enough so there could be a second Mario Kart game on the Switch. Because I feel like they would have to differentiate it a little bit if it was going to be another one on the Switch.
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point. I've thought similar things too. It's a really good idea. Like the evolution to Mario Kart 9 coming from 8 could be a hub world, and a story mode is a really good idea. Different vehicles, just like Diddy Kong. Something else that came up, and I think it was when I was on the Spawncast like months and months ago. That's a really, really cool idea. Is if they kind of took the formula, or I should say the release structure of Smash Brothers, as far as announcing new things, adding new DLC characters, new stages, and started doing that for Mario Kart. So Mario Kart 9, right? It makes so much sense where it becomes more of like a long form release structure kind of title. Now it gets tricky with the monetization, so Nintendo would need to be smart with how they do that to not make people angry. I think they would probably nail it. I'm pretty confident they would do okay.
Do you remember on the Wii U when we got the DLC announcement for Mario Kart 8? And the pricing of it was just like dirt cheap.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what gives me hope that if they ever wanted to adopt the Smash structure and put it into Mario Kart, especially, I mean, why here's the reason this would work is just like you said with like a Smash Kart, is because that could be how they start releasing new characters that aren't Mario Universe characters. Like here's your Samus reveal, here's your Kirby reveal, here's your Olimar, and people would lose their minds.
Right, and it could also be used to sort of simultaneously market the other franchises the same way they do with Smash Brothers. When you think about how strong sales of Mario Kart are, it might have an even bigger impact than Smash in terms of like pushing other franchises. I never
be...
thought about that. I think that's a fantastic idea. It'd make our news cycle even more interesting. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, think of how effective Smash DLC character reveals are. It's crazy. And I can't take credit for it. I can't remember who brought it up, but I'm pretty sure it was on another podcast I was on. And I was like, and I went down that rabbit hole with them because I was like, that is an amazing idea.
Oh, so. I would absolutely love it. So let me just got a couple other things there, and then we'll like talk about a couple of things, and we'll get back to Metroid. So I am Shifty. What's up, man? The waiting is what gets me to with the Prime Trilogy rumors. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where like I want to believe it's real. You know, I feel like it probably is real. It kind of just makes sense. But the extended waiting just kind of, it does sort of breed that doubt a little bit. And I feel like it's part of the anguish that fans feel when there's not a Nintendo Direct announcement and things like that. And I'll even concede that, like, before the Paper Mario reveal, I was a little bit more, I don't want to say I was down the dumps on the year, but I was bending more towards, like, pessimism for the rest of the year. And I still am trying to keep my expectations in check because I do understand that games are going to be delayed. But with the Paper Mario reveal, it kind of, like, gave me a little bit of hope. And it was purely just because they announced a new game. So I kind of get the frustration of not getting announcements, but it does, just because we don't get announced, it doesn't mean it's not real. It's just not the time, you know?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's 100% true. And to the Metroid Trilogy thing, I'm somebody who, man, we've just been on such a roller coaster with this thing, man. It's like, what do we even say about it anymore? And I mean, and that's something where I've heard behind the scenes stuff, like, you know, there's some of it's been public. You brought up Imran Khan earlier, like, I mean, was that his name, Imran Khan? Right?
Yeah, I think you got it right.
Game Informer?
Yeah.
So he put a lot of stuff out there too. Like, there's reasons to believe that game exists, and I tend to, if I focus more on the fanship part of me, like, that game makes too much sense to not do. It's money in their pocket. It's so good for the franchise and the goodwill of the franchise, which has been up and down the last decade. So obviously it's going to happen. But I think like your fan who asked the question, I'm so sick of the waiting. I'm so sick of the back and forth. And I've been dealing with it for like so long. It's like, what are you doing here? Like, but the tricky part is, let's say it's not real. It's not like Nintendo's going to come out and say, hey, a game doesn't exist. That rarely happens from any company.
No.
So it's just a matter of, are we, the fans and the gamers, or even people on YouTube, you know, I would be one of them. Are we guilty of just perpetuating it more than it needs to be perpetuated? Maybe.
But I'll also argue that, let's say hypothetically it just isn't real and it was just vaporware or what have you, just a rumor. But this constant talk about it creates that conversation. Nintendo obviously knows about that conversation, and it helps to actually maybe lead to it becoming a reality. Because at the end of the day, we're not even talking about a remake here. I mean, that would be awesome, don't get me wrong, but I would settle for a remaster, and if it is a remaster, I feel like the development of that wouldn't take more than, 2 years tops, probably less. I'm not a developer, but I have to assume. Like, it's possible that it didn't exist, and maybe it is made into existence as Nintendo sees the desire for it, and they're like, oh, you know, Prime 4 is gonna be a ways off, maybe we now come up with something else to help tide fans over until that point. So even if it's not real yet, it may become real.
Maybe, and that decision could have already been made. It's a good point. And I'll even do you one more, because not only are we mostly just talking about a remaster, which is easier than a remake, I'd argue that they could even just port the standard version, standard definition, nothing fancy, just like they did on the Wii U. It's less exciting. We all want the remaster version, right? But even if they did that, even if they said $19.99, it's on the eShop for the Switch, you can play it.
Just having it in portable mode would be a win.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I agree with that. I will admit I'll also be a little disappointed. Like, I'll be like happy, and it'll be a bittersweet sort of thing. But yeah, I think that could kind of happen. It does make sense. If they put it on the Wii U, I think it'll. I'm gonna, if I have to go to Vegas, I'll bet for a decent amount of money that eventually Prime Trilogy will come out.
Yeah. I think I'm the same way, even though it's hard for us to keep just waiting and waiting, like you're like that person said. So, yeah.
So I have a couple questions here, and then we'll just dive straight into the rest of the topics. There's a Metroid one, which I'm gonna save after. But one,
I feel terrible because we're getting close on time.
This is totally fine. This is how the podcasts always go. I go to the questions, and the questions become the podcast because everyone has like great ideas. But it's totally fine. We're good. So Sabbath 64, Mario Kart 9 needs a double dash mode. I would be okay with it. I don't expect it, but I would be okay with it. How do you feel about that?
I think as a mode is an interesting idea, because you're taking whatever 15 or 16 years ago was like the core revolutionary mechanic to a game.
Maybe optimize it a little bit
and making it
a different. Oh yeah. It would be cool.
Yeah, I think that there's some alterations that they could do, like you said. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I have no reason to say no to it.
I mean, I grew up on Double Dash with my brother, and like I love that. They were like, if you played in sync and co-op mode, you could get like an ultra hyper boost, and I found ways to like make myself useful up just playing from behind. Like you could do like the punches to left and right, which sort of pushed your vehicle a little bit, and like sometimes if you were about to fall off the stage and someone knocked you, you could use that punch trick to just get yourself back on. So I did really like that co-op mechanic. So if they were to find a way to really like build up the options for both players on one cart, I think it could be great. So I'm all
and to his question, I mean, the Joy-Cons exist the way they do, so there could be something to the motion, or playing co-op on the same cart means you have to use like the Joy-Cons on the side, or I don't know. There's just something there, right? It just makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So, Birdman, in 2019, King Zell said that 2020 will be an interesting year for Zelda fans. Remember? I do remember that, and there was even more rumors early on in the year that supported Zelda for this year, but then other rumors came out after that from Sabby and such that suggested otherwise. So we've had like back and forth on that, and I'll say that because assuming the rumors are true, that's information that's coming from something that's in development, and that's a fluid process and plans change. So I hope that those rumors are true. Obviously, I want it sooner than later, but I think given how development is fluid and there's been different rumors, it's just kind of, and the whole pandemic, I'm just going to try to keep my expectations in check. My belief, I'm on a 50-50 stance. Like, it might happen, it might not. But that's pretty much how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, there's more than just Breath of the Wild, too. It could be something like bringing over Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. People have asked for that for a while. So, or, the long sought after Skyward Sword. So maybe something like that.
I always found it weird because I don't know if you remember this, but there was at one point where there was like a Zelda concert, and AJ and Uma said something along the lines of Skyward Sword, right? And people were like, what does he mean? And nothing came of that. But I mean, just because it hasn't come yet doesn't mean it isn't in the works. Maybe maybe like, for example, this year we're getting the Mario remasters, potentially as a collection, I hope. What if Nintendo mimics that next year for the Zelda anniversary, and there's like a Zelda collection where they get Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker. Oops.
Yeah. That sounds awesome, dude. That would be such a cool idea. And I personally, I feel like Skyward Sword will not remain trapped on the Wii. That's my whole thing about that game. And I know they got themselves into a corner because of the motion controls, and I get it. But there's no way, when they've brought every other Zelda game to multiple consoles in multiple ways, 2 of them have been, actually I guess 4 of them you could argue have been remastered with the 2 on 3DS. So, and Skyward Sword, it's divisive, but it's a big game. It is popular. There's a lot more people that like it than don't. And there's a lot of money to be made, and I also just want it. I think Skyward Sword is awesome. It gets a bad rap, so
yeah. For me, Skyward Sword, I loved it. Okay, I cried at the end of it, just for the record.
It's very emotional,
but I usually cry at the end of most Zelda games, though. But I also had the desire, because like my issue was, like, it was very linear, and I felt like there should have been more openness to it. I mean, there's only so much you can change with a remaster, but I feel like maybe they could at least optimize, like, the latter half of the game a little bit. Kind of like what they did with Wind Waker, how, like, it felt like the sort of padded out a little bit with the Triforce quest. Skyward Sword towards the end felt a little bit padded out as well. So I think they could at least optimize that a little bit. And some people might want like traditional controls instead of motion controls. I think it is actually feasible to do that. So
Same.
You put that in there. You give it a similar engine to Wind Waker HD, where you just increase the lighting a little bit and clean up the textures. I think it could look really, really good. Probably better than Twilight Princess HD, just because of the style.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I hope it happens, but I mean, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, forgive me. I do. It looks like we got about 25 minutes. I feel bad. So for everyone watching, it is totally my fault that we got to close it out in about 25 minutes, because I do think you normally go longer, right?
We hit for the 2 hour mark usually.
Yeah, we're
sometimes we go hour 45. It's give or take 30 minutes. Sometimes we do go through 90, so you're good.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I just know because I know there's people asking questions and topics, and I hate the idea of missing them, and we're so long form with our answers. I don't want to miss people's stuff.
Well, I at the same time, I feel like this is like the best kind of conversation where we have so much more we could talk about that.
Yeah.
There's still desire for more. So I think this is great, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So
Cool.
One more question, and then we'll get to Paper Mario and then everything else. So this is a Metroid thing. So Regbro, out of the both of us, we know Silex will be the star antagonist for Metroid Prime 4. How do you think the story will progress with Silex's addition into the Prime universe? Will we learn more about him? So before the development restart, we had heard on several occasions and gotten teases like at the end of Federation Force and then obviously the Prime 3 that, Silex is involved some way. I'm assuming that he's still involved even with the restart because the same producer's working on it. So I don't think that's changed. And I do feel like there could be something related to the Metroid egg that is stolen at the end of Federation Force. I feel like that can maybe become like the next Metroid Prime, maybe. And I've also had this hope that Silex would be more fully featured in Prime 4 as kind of, instead of, maybe he could take like the Dark Samus role, as like that humanoid rival.
Yeah, so your theory about Silex is exactly what mine has been this whole time. You stole it right out of my brain. But here's the thing, though. He asked the question like, we know Silex is going to be the antagonist, and while it seems obvious he would be, we actually haven't had any story elements confirmed about this game. Nothing has been actually confirmed. But of course, if they're going to even make Prime 4 the way Prime 3 ended, even though that was 13 years ago, they gave themselves a connecting point to a fourth game by showing the Silex tease at the end of Corruption. So
I always thought that was so weird how it was supposed to be an end, and then they just gave us that. Like, yeah. It's crazy because, and that's, oh man, I don't want to go in too many. I have to be careful because if we tangent with only 25 minutes, we're not going to be able to do it. I will just say that it's a good point. They wrapped up the main story with Prime, so that's, regardless of Silex, that's why I always thought that we would never see a Metroid Prime 4. And so when they announced Metroid Prime 4, I was like, what is your story? And here's the thing. If this game continues to be called Metroid Prime 4 until release, heaven, like in case they change it to something weird or whatever, but it's Prime 4. I'm sure it'll always be Prime 4. You've got to have Prime and or Dark Samus, who essentially was Metroid Prime, the same entity, as a part of the story, or some other force's goal is to try to resurrect or recreate Prime the same way you talk about the egg. Yeah,
it's Metroid Prime. So, and that's why if Silex is some sort of connecting tissue to the fourth game, it makes sense because of the tease. He becomes a perfect foil to Samus that she maybe is constantly face to face with throughout her journey, but ultimately is not the final foe. The final foe has to become Metroid Prime. That's exactly the role Dark Samus played. And just like you said, and I think that's perfect for what Silex would be in that game.
So I have a question for you. So I really enjoyed all three Metroid Prime games, but I always felt like the end of Prime 3 was just slightly anticlimactic. And maybe that's just my own skewed perspective, but my perspective is I like fighting giant, mega, epic bosses at the end of every Metroid game. And I felt like the final boss, I mean, it was big, but it just, like, you fought Dark Samus before, and then it was the Aurora unit, right? it was cool, but it just didn't feel like an appropriate final boss for the entire Prime trilogy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's also very easy. It was very easy.
Yeah, yeah. I never got to beat it in hyper mode because I couldn't get past Moganar. It just couldn't. But
wow, Moganar
in hyper mode.
Pretty early.
I couldn't.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I was able to beat Prime 1 in hyper mode, but for whatever reason in Prime 3 I couldn't. Maybe if I go back now I'll find a way. But
they're hard games. They're hard games. It's okay. Yeah.
I'll get over it. I guess like.
So you're looking for a bigger finale, basically.
Right. I want a bigger finale, and I almost feel like if you have Silex involved, and maybe somehow bring in Kraid, give us Kraid and Ridley throughout the story. Yeah. I don't feel like you need like another humanoid rival. Like I wouldn't want this hypothetical other Metroid to become the next Metroid Prime and then turn into another Dark Samus again. I would almost prefer it to stay as a giant, monstrous Metroid Prime, so that would still be the final fight, and it would fulfill my desire to have these giant, epic bosses to be the climax. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I like the idea. I totally get what you're going for. It is very Metroid to have this kind of big old thing at the end. Although, to be fair, it's not that that's not true, but the real final battle in Metroid Prime was just Metroid Prime in like a little room underneath the big version of Metroid Prime. Mm-hmm. And then even in Echoes, after you beat the Emperor Ing, you do one more fight with Dark Samus. But I mean, you're still right. I'm not trying to say that it's not correct.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. There are exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they still are tied to this humongous final battle that you are talking about. They are in those games. So yeah, I mean, and so I see what you're saying. Silux doesn't really fill that role, right? He's just, like you said, he's just another humanoid. There's been this weird back and forth on the internet about if Silux is also Samus's brother. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
No, I have. Because they had Other M, and they kind of use that to build that story up a little bit more. His brother, like there's Adam Malkovich, and I think it's Ian Malkovich, and he died in an explosion supposedly. And I guess the argument is that maybe he was a nice person, then he died in an explosion, but survived, and then somehow became Silux because he hated the Federation for what they forced him into, maybe?
But it can't really be that because of the way it breaks down with the timeline, because of when those two games take place. But does
Other M happen after Metroid Prime?
Yes, it
does. So maybe it is still, but then at the same time, like Ian Malkovich was. Yeah, I don't.
Like a flashback. I see what you're saying because that would have been before Other M took place. I see what you're saying.
I like the idea of it because it would have like those stakes there. Oh, this is a long lost friend, and now he's become this bad person, or maybe not even a bad person. I'm not sure, but it is weird how Silux does seem to have like this sort of magnetism towards Samus. So. Yeah. I mean, maybe they could do it, you know? I mean, even if it doesn't match up with the story right now, they could retcon. Like, that happens. Yeah. So.
Well, and there's another element, and I know we keep going on about Metroid. I love this. I hope your viewers are liking all the Metroid stuff, because I could do this forever. Okay, perfect. But I would say that, what was the point of it? Oh, yeah. An element that people don't really consider with Metroid Prime is when that game would take place. Because most likely it'll take place almost right after Metroid Prime 3.
Otherwise it would just devalue the final scene.
It would. Yeah. I mean, maybe. I think that there could be a world where they just say, several years have passed, and then we pick up and the Metroid Prime entity returns for XYZ reason, and Silux is here too, and so it's a problem. And so then it takes place closer to the later era, which is the Super Metroid, Other M, and Fusion era, which is the kind of end there. So they could move it around. Maybe they could even say Metroid Prime 4 does take place after Fusion. So it wouldn't be a sequel to Fusion, and it wouldn't
Metroid Prime 4 is Metroid 5.
Well, that would be. Could you imagine Metroid Prime 4:5 would be the title?
I mean, I think it'd be hilarious, and I'd be so down for it. Like, I guess I like the idea of the story being expanded upon into the future. Knowing what happens after Fusion, and if they do it with the Prime style, I'm so down for that. But
I mean, it would be interesting. I think that it's definitely possible. My money is still on that's not the case. In which case, Prime 4 would probably take place before Super Metroid. Yeah. But it's just, I think we should, remind ourselves that anything is possible until Nintendo actually tells us what they're going to do with it. So, who knows, man?
Yeah, and I just want to point out that retcons are still possible. You know,
Yeah.
I get into Zelda theory all the time, and Nintendo's definitely changed things.
Yeah.
They still may. So hard to say, but it's exciting to think about at least, and I feel like it's still at least a good bet that Silex is going to be involved for sure. So we'll go over some of the other things and we'll figure it out. So
okay,
we got news of Paper Mario, and I'm pretty much in the same boat as you with Paper Mario. Like, I played Paper Mario on the N64. I didn't get around to playing Thousand Year Door, and that's pretty. And the other games I just kind of ignored. I thought Color Splash was pretty. Didn't get around to buying it. I might buy it now just to sort of play more Paper Mario leading up to the release. But my knowledge of Paper Mario is pretty limited. But that trailer, I thought was pretty lit. Like, I am now hyped for Paper Mario. I love the way the characters are. There seems to be a lot of personality and quirkiness to them, and the world seems a lot more expansive. And I know people really want partners back, and we saw some evidence for that, it seems. The only thing is we don't know how the combat system's going to entirely play out because they have like a sort of puzzle structure to it, it seems. I don't feel like they're doing exactly what they did with Thousand Year Door and N64, but they're trying something new. So I know there's some controversy there, but at least from what I've seen, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, like you said, we kind of have a similar history. I played Super Paper Mario on the Wii and just a smidge of Thousand Year Door, but not enough to really mean anything. So I also don't have a huge history with Paper Mario. I loved Super Paper Mario for what it's worth. Like, I really liked the game. And just like you, I think the trailer looks awesome, but there is controversy out there. You know, fans, people who really know Paper Mario, a lot of them are questioning this game. And you brought up some of these points. I've done research and I've listened to other people kind of break it down and talk about it from the perspective of being a fan. And with the exception of one friend of mine who's a huge fan and he likes all of the games, so he's excited for this. A lot of people who are long-term diehard Paper Mario fans are nervous about the combat and the partners, like you said. But you know, maybe you and I aren't the best litmus test for this, but you and I are both very excited with our limited knowledge of the series. It looks like the gameplay looks fun. Like you said, the world looks much bigger and expansive. There's variety to the locations. It seems like they've got the same humor built into it because Super Paper Mario was hilarious. I was like laughing out loud playing that game. It was so funny. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. But again, you and I might not be the best people to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's just kind of funny. Like, I think some people want us to talk more about Paper Mario, but I also kind of should talk about what I know. So, like, when the Paper Mario thing happened, I was like, okay, this totally impacts what I had planned for the week. I'm still excited about it, but, like, there's only so much I can say on it until I guess I start playing it. But I feel, at least just to kind of add something to the conversation, I think you mentioned how, like, we're not necessarily the best indicator because we're not long-time hardcore Paper Mario fans. But I think Paper Mario still kind of sells well. And while there may be this core fan base that prefers the old combat system, and I'm all for that idea, I think Nintendo doesn't necessarily think they have to have it be exactly like the past. Like, they're more interested in just building whatever Paper Mario game they want to build for today. That doesn't mean I don't think they don't listen to the criticisms. Like, I feel like they're probably moving away from that card system that people hated.
Oh yeah. I think there's a lot of lessons from people's response to Color Splash that will be input into this game. Yeah. Maybe not as much as most people were asking. Let me ask you this. From my memory of playing Super Paper Mario and also the first Mario and Luigi, I kind of have a memory of what that combat and that battle system was like. Do you know though how the Paper Mario combat is supposed to be and how it looks different in this trailer? Because I haven't been able to put it together, and I haven't heard anyone really break it down yet.
And again, it's one of those things where, like, I try not to speak from things I don't know too much about because I don't want to mislead people. Yeah. But from what I understand, like, with Paper Mario games, you have Mario and whatever partners you may have, and they kind of have their own different options. But, like, when you attack, yes, it's like an RPG, and there are numbers involved, and you can use different abilities. But you also kind of time your attack, and you know, if you can press the A button, the B button at the right time, that kind of can boost the attack a little bit. From what the ones I've played, And then you have your partner who can do something similar as well with a different type of attack system. And then from what I've heard of like the 3DS Paper Mario game, there's like a card system involved, and it's not really the same style in terms of timing your attacks and doing things of that nature. And I think people don't really like that system because it doesn't feel like the way Paper Mario was supposed to be. But that's really all I know from that. I'll probably try and play some more Paper Mario games now so I can learn a little bit more about it. But that's pretty much what I understand from it.
Gotcha. Well, that timing mechanic part that you bring up, to me, that kind of is enough, I think, to inform my own brain about what maybe one of the core mechanics to the battle system that people love is supposed to be. And you brought up the Sticker Star, and I know that it did employ a totally different system within that. And same with Color Splash, because my memory from Color Splash reviews was you mentioned the card system where like the card is on the gamepad and you like had to slide it around to do something, or that I don't know much more than that. Just there's something about the cards and just people really didn't like that. So it's, I don't know, it's interesting. I'm kind of sad that I guess the game isn't resonating with everybody. I mean, there's a lot of people who are excited. I guess I don't want to make it sound like everyone hates the game, right? I mean, you've probably seen there's plenty of people who are just over the moon for this game. And that makes me happy because I'm really excited and I'm not even a huge Paper Mario fan. But because there is, some dissension out there, there are some long-term fans that feel like this isn't the Paper Mario game for them. Like, that sucks. I feel bad for them. I would like this game to just be like universally making everyone really happy and excited. Just like if Metroid Prime 4, if we see gameplay and it's like a top-down turn-based RTS, I'll be like, what? That's not Metroid Prime. Like, I'm no longer excited about this game. And so if this is that for Paper Mario fans, then I get it, and I feel bad for those fans, but it makes me feel lucky, I guess, that I'm just like, I'm oblivious. So I'm like, looks great to me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Imagine seeing Federation Force and being excited about it and just not.
Yeah. Oof.
I tried the game. I don't even think it's a bad game. It just kind of wasn't what we wanted. And that's pretty much it.
Oh, I mean, when I say it was rough, I more mean the reveal was rough.
Yeah,
and the feeling that we all had. Yeah, the game is actually not so bad. You're right.
But I actually feel a little similar. Like the same feeling I had for Federation Force is kind of similar feeling I had a 3D World actually. For 3D, like given that it was like the first HD system for Nintendo, that felt like it was a little less ambitious than say something like Odyssey. So even though 3D World is a great game, I 100%ed it. I definitely liked it.
Wow.
It wasn't what it wasn't what had me. It wasn't as exciting to me as Odyssey, for example. And I feel like that had impact on sales too.
I think so. Definitely still a big seller on the Wii U though.
Yeah. Still did well. Just I feel like it could have been better if they had gone in a different direction.
Yeah, well, and then you see Odyssey, which has sold like 17 million, right?
Yeah.
And you have to imagine if it was a better game, it could have sold more than whatever it sold on the Wii U.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Like, I don't want to pretend like 3D World's a bad game because it is a really good game. I liked it. And I actually preferred 3D Land on the 3DS. I know it's an unpopular opinion.
And I think part of that is expectations, though. Because my expectations for 3DS were different. And I also 100% of that game, and I really enjoyed it. There was no disappointment with that one.
Yeah. It's a great game. But I also think, on the 3D World thing, we all expect that to show up on the Switch at some point. And I'm telling you, that game is going to be a mega hit.
3D World Deluxe?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah. I suppose rumor is that it's coming out this year.
Yeah. I mean, if that could be a game that they release in holiday, and it's not like that can carry Nintendo's holiday because it's just a last gen port. But if it comes out in that time, it's just going to do gangbusters, man. And no matter how many people like or don't like that game, if you look at the new Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, sold like 4 or 5 million, I think, on the Switch.
I think 3D World Deluxe is probably going to do better than that.
Oh yeah, I think it could hit 10 million. I don't think that's a crazy thought that game hits 10 million.
No, yeah.
So.
The only issue I have is that we're getting Paper Mario, supposed Mario remasters. I wonder if people maybe like not want to buy 3 different Mario games in a 6-month period. I feel like the 3D World. I think that the interest for 3D World and the Mario remasters has some overlap. Paper Mario is like an entirely different genre. And I still, obviously 3D World has a different play style, but it is still a 3D platformer to an extent. So I wonder if that could maybe impact sales a little bit. But either way, I do agree with you that when it comes out, it's gonna sell a whole bunch, and from a business perspective, it makes incredible sense. Absolutely. Yeah. But on that note,
everything
though,
they've done on the Wii U, though, so yeah.
Yeah, because we've had, just to cover one more topic, Pikmin 3. For Jeff Grubb saying that both the Mario remasters and Pikmin 3 are coming soon. And we've gotten Pikmin 3 rumored for a while. It's been kind of rumored alongside the 3D World rumors as well. Kind of like we had the 2D Metroid and Paper Mario rumors alongside. We've had the 3D World and Pikmin rumors rumored alongside each other. How do you feel about that? Are you a big Pikmin fan, and do you think it's happening?
Yes to both. Okay. I am a huge Pikmin fan. Yeah, Pikmin 3 made me a big Pikmin fan. I thought the first 2 games were just kind of fun and cute, and then 3 blew my mind. So I'm very excited at the idea. I think it's very likely, if not almost a sure thing. I just don't see why that game won't release on the Switch. Regardless of the rumor, I mean, I tend to think that he's got some credibility, you know, and so she's probably right. But even without that rumor, it just makes too much sense. And I would rather have that than 3D World. I like Pikmin 3 much more than I like 3D World. I've honestly, I feel like before the COVID thing this year, I actually think that Pikmin 4 was almost going to be a lock to come out this year.
Shigeru Miyamoto's been done for years.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Yeah. To me, without the pandemic, when you looked at the gap of 2020 before the year started and before the pandemic, the perfect game that's like a mid-tier to high-tier Nintendo franchise is that Pikmin 4 that we already heard about to release in that huge gap after the March Animal Crossing time this year. Same with Bayonetta 3. Those games make so much sense. Yeah. But with COVID, maybe Pikmin 4 would be getting pushed back. And so then the Pikmin 3 port can swoop in to kind of save the day a little bit.
I agree with that. And I also feel like, because, for example, we talked about with Zelda how it might not be the right economic environment to bring it out. Especially with Pikmin 4, which is a smaller franchise that isn't as known. I feel like you want to bring that out at the right time. Yeah. Because it's the kind of game that I think deserves a lot of... Similar to Metroid, where I think it's obviously, you and I both know it's one of the greatest series ever, quality-wise, but sales-wise, it just doesn't measure up to Mario Zelda. But I think it deserves to. I think on the Switch, both Pikmin and Metroid have a huge opportunity to reach a whole other new audience, thanks to social media and how the Switch has its whole attach rate. So I think they're going to be careful about that. And I'm actually agree with you that I'm more excited for the Pikmin 3 than 3D World Deluxe, even though like I said, I liked it and I 100%ed it. I also, because of that, I don't feel like I need any more of it. But with Pikmin 3, while I did own it and I did play it, I never beat it. And part of the reason I didn't beat it was because my gamepad's battery started dying out, so it had to be tethered. No. So it just kind of became a little annoying to play it in that way. So I kind of want to play it with more traditional controls, or at least Wii style controls. Just to make it more comfortable to play in different ways. So I've been waiting for this for a while, just so I can play through it in my own personal way and finish it and enjoy it.
Here's the thing, though. This is so crazy to think about. When you look at what 2020 would become, reminding ourselves, we all need to remember this, because 2020 is weird, so it's not like it's Nintendo being mean to us. But it's crazy to think that if any of this is true, July comes, Paper Mario releases, a great brand new game that's really exciting. And then after that, it's 4 last-gen old ports of Mario games, and it's Pikmin 3. And it's all these old ports of old games potentially filling out the library. And we've already had Tokyo Mirage Sessions and now Wonderful 101 in this year as well.
Yep. So and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, while I would kind of classify that as more of a new game because of how much work they put into it, it is repurposed content an old game. To some extent. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's a great game, but it's another one. You're right.
I'm so stoked for it. That might be my game of the year, depending on what else comes out. But very excited about it. And I actually,
it's just a lot of port content to fill out 2020 if that happens.
But I also feel like because of all these ports, it sort of strengthens the argument that this supposed 2D Metroid game is more of a new game rather than a remake. Because I feel like after a certain point, you kind of have to balance out the remasters and ports over brand new built ground up games, So
it's true, but if we've all been asking for the Prime Trilogy, you could just throw that one in the mix too if it ends up being real. It's like, well, there's 3 more games that are all just, ports of prior generation games. So it's just interesting when you think that if all or some of this ends up being real, it's like that's pretty much what Nintendo's 2020 is, with the exception of 2 big games, all ports of last gen games. It's crazy.
True.
If it's real. If it's true.
And I think that's kind of exciting because we don't really know. And this year it's even hard to predict Nintendo. And just like the Paper Mario thing, we don't really know when Nintendo could just sort of announce randomly. They may have stuff that's been ready for a while. Like you brought up Prime Trilogy, maybe they could use that. That's a possibility. We brought up Retro Studios game. There's a possibility that could have been ready since they're already developing Prime 4. You never know. I know you got to go, but one quick thing. Maybe it's not actually quick. So
let's go for it. I'm good.
Okay.
We still got daylight, so we can make it outside. We're good.
Okay. So we didn't get to the hirings exactly, but there's been a whole bunch of hirings from Retro Studios, and like I'm sure you've heard about the hiring. Yeah, you brought it up in your video recently. But there's been a whole bunch of hirings lately. There's people who worked on the Council Star Wars game and Tomb Raider and Borderlands, and we've even had from Call of Duty and Halo in the past hired as well. Like, it seems like Retro Studios is continually hiring not just talent, high-profile talent, people who've worked on big AAA games in the industry, and a lot of them are either sci-fi related or first-person related, and if not that, at the very least, like, very graphically intensive kind of games. So, given all those hirings, what is your take on what this could suggest for Prime 4? Like, do you think this is suggesting that Prime 4 is going to be a looker of lookers? Is it going to release maybe alongside a Switch Pro a year and a half or 2 from now? What do you think's sort of going on?
I definitely think it's going to be a looker. Even before these hirings started, this even went back to before. The first major hiring we heard about was Kyle Heffley from 343, who worked on Halo.
Yeah.
And even before that, I had been stating in a lot of my conversations that I think Metroid Prime 4 will end up coming out and being the best looking game we've ever seen Nintendo make ever. I think it's going to be that good. And so it's very exciting to think about, especially if you go back to what they achieved with the first 3 games on the hardware they were made on in those years, like just the whole artistic design and the 60 frame rate performance of those games. It's crazy what they were at that time. Now we're going to get the 2021 or 2022 version of that, on HD hardware. So I think it's going to be, the best looking game Nintendo has ever made in any franchise ever. It's just going to be. Then you look at the hirings. And I see 2 camps of hirings. I see the hirings that are meant for the visual performance and the visual aesthetic of the game, the art direction. And I see the hirings that are more about the gameplay. And even though Kyle Heffley, for example, was hired as kind of, I think, an environmental and a character design person as part of his hiring, I still see him and the fellow who came from Tomb Raider as somebody who could bring gameplay fundamentals into this game. And then I see the guys, and also the guy from Gearbox who came and worked on Borderlands. But then when you look at somebody who worked on Battlefield on DICE's Frostbite engine, and you look at the guy that came from Star Wars, working on the Star Wars game.
Yeah.
Those are the people that I think are meant to really push the limits of your visuals and get the most out of your visual engine as possible. So I think between these 2 camps of hirings, you've got some guys that are going to really help with the gameplay and the feel of the game, and the other ones that are going to really focus on how this game looks and the tone. And I just, I am a Metroid fanboy, so I'm going to have this fanboy answer, but I just have the highest of highest hopes. Nintendo is not going to screw this game up. And the biggest evidence to this, even more than that, is the simple fact that they canceled this game and restarted
100% agree with you. To me it's Breath of the Wild 2 but Metroid, because the only other time Nintendo has ever had a dedicated video to announce a delay was with Breath of the Wild. That's one of the best games ever made in recent history. I think Nintendo has the same ambition as they did with Breath of the Wild for Metroid Prime, and when we see it, I think it's going to blow our minds.
It is definitely going to blow our mind. I mean, you never know. You always have to prepare yourself for some reality if it just turns out to be like, oh, it looks fine. Maybe it just is going to look fine in whatever that means, like gameplay or visuals. But I think it's just too easy for us to get hyped about it right now, and just everything sounds good. All these hirings are very exciting, and so I feel pretty great about it, and so it's just time to see the darn thing.
Yeah, it's at least reassuring that they've been building up talent for it. So I know you gotta go. I got one super chat here. I'm gonna read it, and then we could
let's do it.
head our go our ways. Emery, thank you very much for the super chat. I'm waiting until Metroid Prime 4 is my first Metroid game. Your first Metroid game. That's very interesting. So I feel like Metroid Prime 4 might be a really great way to like get into it. But I'll also say that me personally, Metroid Prime was my first Metroid game. Not just Prime, but like Metroid as a whole. That's what got me into the series. And if there's a Metroid Prime trilogy, I strongly recommend you consider that, because just seeing it from the beginning, I think would be really special. And I mean, to me, Metroid Prime is easily one of the top 5 greatest games of all time, maybe even higher. So I definitely think you should consider that. But of course, Metroid Prime 4, when it comes out, I think you and I both agree is going to be an amazing game.
Yeah, I mean, if your first game is Prime 4, I'm sure that's going to be pretty satisfying and totally worth it. And the idea of going back and playing the older ones, I mean, you're talking about 3 of my all-time favorite games, and the first one being my all-time favorite video game ever made. But I would say there's a really good chance that if they don't make a Prime trilogy on Switch, and so you maybe miss an opportunity to play a newer version of those games, Prime 4 comes out, you play Prime 4, hopefully you just love it and it blows your mind. It's going to be hard to go back. I hate to admit it, but to be fair, those games are pretty timeless. They really hold up well, but they don't hold up perfectly well for somebody who maybe is playing it for the first time in 2021 or 2022 or whenever you would do it, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the older, because I think the gameplay is going to make some pretty big quality of life jumps for what gaming is like nowadays compared to what it was like in 2002.
And like simple things, even like, for example, when you shoot a door, maybe that door will open pretty much instantly. Basically, as I imagine, loading will be better on the Switch. I also expect
it does not happen with the old games.
Paced. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like it'll be faster paced? Like a lot of people sort of complain that Prime, the series, felt a little tanky, and in the 2D games, Samus is a lot more agile. So they might maybe take some ideas from other first-person games that had a lot more parkour involved to maybe speed up the gameplay a little bit with Metroid Prime.
Yeah, I do think they will do something to that. I think that they're going to have to strike a really tricky balance between making it feel like it's, even gameplay-wise, part of the same series. So it has to do some things and I think be built on the foundation of the same kind of gameplay and combat. But I think they will need to and probably will adjust it some way. I don't know if it's speeding it up or just changing it up, like changing the rhythm based on what her abilities with her arm cannon are. If she's, my hope is for some kind of melee attack and melee defensive abilities.
They did it in Samus Returns.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be something they very much need to do, even in first-person Prime 4. I think that they can do it. So, and those are the things that, if they knock that stuff out of the park, it's going to be so great. And so then if you go back to the 2002 Metroid Prime, you're going to be like, well, Samus was so much more limited, And so for you and I, we could probably go back to it and play it anytime because we already know it that way. So we would know what we'd be getting into. But the person who asked the question might not get something out of it if they go backwards.
I do understand your point. I do think it is a great point. And to add to that, though, from what we've seen of the Prime games, you don't really need them to understand the context of the story so much. So you probably can go into Prime 4 without having played another Prime game, and you will enjoy it still to the fullest. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the story is... I like to say that Metroid Prime, the Metroid series doesn't have story, it has lore. That's the way I look at Metroid.
That's a good way. That's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah, I think, and when you look at it that way, that's where what you say is correct. Like, you don't have to worry about the events of the first 3 to go into Prime 4. But if that actually could be something that works out well going backwards, because you could play Prime 4 and be, oh, this is cool, I want to learn more. And the better advantage to going backwards wouldn't be the gameplay, but it would be to get more of the lore and Samus's relationship to the Chozo and what happens on Aether with the... I mean, that just becomes really cool back lore to the game that is 4.
Which I think is almost poetic for the way Metroid has always been, at least the Prime series, because, for example, the scanning. entirely optional for the most part, but if you so choose, when you feel compelled to go deeper and research more and look more into this world, you are rewarded with like books of information. And
it's context to what Samus is doing in that game. Who are the space pirates? What are they doing? What is Phazon? What is this, experiment that they call Prime? What even is that thing?
Yeah.
You read about it, you're not sure, and then you meet it at the end of the game. And so it's really cool.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. Anyway, Rob, I know you got to go. Thank you for coming and staying a little bit later. Super appreciate it. It'd be great to go on your channel sometime, or you can come back here, because I think our discussion was awesome, and I feel like we could probably go on for a lot longer if we could. But thank you so much. Guys, make sure to check out Rob's channel. It is linked in the description below, especially for Nintendo and Metroid content. But anyways, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Man. Off?